The Brink of War was directed by Michael Russell Gunn and is another joint by Angel Studios. It's about a meeting between Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev in Reykjavik, Iceland in 1986 when the world is on the brink of nuclear war. Jeff Daniels plays Reagan and Jared Harris plays Gorbachev. The picture takes place primarily in a meeting room between the two men, with occasional scene changes to Washington where Reagan's wife Nancy stayed behind and also follows some adventures that Gorbachev's wife is on while she is at the compound. The first thing that surprised me in this film was just how gentle it seems to be toward Gorbachev. I expected this to be a hit piece on him, and it has its moments of that for sure, but they portray him as someone who wants to do the right thing by his country just as much as Reagan wants to do right by his country. Jared Harris is the best performance in this picture by a mile. He clocked into work here with showing Gorbachev being strong-minded but open to proper negotiations, and shows his relationship with his wife as being mostly a sweet relationship despite his mistrust of his verbal adversary. Jeff Daniels is a great actor. I have been watching him my whole life, and I love many of his roles, but I think he is miscast here, and I'll explain why. I personally think he is good in this film on an acting level, but not once did I believe he was trying to give off an impersonation of Ronald Reagan. His mannerisms, voice, and eyes just kept screaming to me as being Jeff Daniels sitting at the table, being Jeff Daniels. As awful as I thought the Reagan biopic was from a couple of years ago, at least Dennis Quaid got the body language of Reagan down right. In this film, it seems like Daniels was putting on a stage performance of a character instead of an attempt to embody it. The screenplay also wrote him as being this great negotiator who was always in a cool, calm, and collected state. And I just always saw Ronald Reagan as more arrogant in his talks and speeches with a tint of playfulness that isn't on display in this picture. J.K. Simmons plays George Shultz in this movie, who was Reagan's Secretary of State at that time. He does a good job in the role as well. In the first act or so of the picture, when the two leads are sitting at a table across from each other, it would do these weird 24 of the show style shots dividing the scene where one character was on the left in one half of the screen and the other was on the right in another divided half of the screen. It happens a couple of times and it left me puzzled why they were doing this when the table wasn't that long and was able to show both men at each end of the table in all of the medium wide shots that are in this film. It was a strange stylistic decision. However, later in the film, when the two are starting to make progress in their negotiations, the table shrinkens multiple times, signifying they are coming closer together and to a deal. There are about 3 adjustments to the table at that point until we end up where they are sitting at a table that is about the size of any cafe table, like they were really close together, and I thought that was very well done in conveying what it wanted to. Now, the motives of the two characters are revealed throughout the discussion, and the film identifies well what both of them are secretly looking to get out of this meeting. Reagan is concerned primarily with someone being allowed to come to the U.S. to meet their brother for his birthday, and Gorbachev is concerned with the Star Wars project, which I loved that the film mentioned it, and I can't help but laugh at the name of this project. I learned what it was when I was a kid, and I never once stopped giggling about it, for obvious reasons, I'm sure. Unfortunately, this picture has a few terrible subplots that didn't need to be in it at all. There's one involving Gorbachev's wife and some journalist that was a complete waste of time. I guess it was supposed to be her flexing that she was there, but the First Lady was not. And the other involved Nancy Reagan being back in Washington and coming up with ways to outshine her instead, which leads to some cancer research plan. You're telling me that Nancy Reagan created a cancer initiative because she wanted to take the piss out of Gorbachev's wife? If someone wants to fact check me, please do so, but I personally call BS on that. But the film was too bloated because of these silly subplots. There are many times where the meetings between the two men break for speaking to their advisors, and I understand that from a political level, but from a movie construction level, it slows things down immensely, especially because most of the time we have this downtime with Ronald Reagan, all we get is him listening to these weird vinyl records and having PTSD flashbacks about his assassination attempt. I presume to remind everyone that had happened a few years earlier than when this film takes place, but it had no purpose to the story, his ultimate characterization within the film, or anything except I guess he battled with this demon for years after the fact, I guess? This picture also deifies both Gorbachev and Reagan way too much. I can't unsee what the reality of both men were, and the fact that this film wants to portray them as nothing more than two great diplomats who just wanted the best for their countries came up to me as insincere, because too much history has been written about the two men that I am unable to detach myself from that. I am glad that they decided to make this a pretty isolating story with one central focus, so for that reason alone, I think it is much better than the Reagan biopic. But this film didn't fully convince me why it needed to exist except to show Ronald Reagan as this savior of some sorts. The film even ends with narration from J.K. Simmons where Reagan knew everything was going to go down the way it went down once the Cold War ended, and it came off as more of the same from Angel Studios Pictures, filleting the topic of their movie without giving care about the unflattering things that surrounded it. So I will say that this movie is fine. It's the best Angel Studios film I've seen since The Senior, with two really good performances, a small scope idea that is a pretty decent cat and mouse game mentally, but it has some terrible subplotting and an ending that left me sour. Jeff Daniels pops up during the end credits for the traditional garbage pay it forward QR code crap I've complained about every time I see one of their movies. At least Daniels had fun with it and did a pay it forward himself on camera. That was kind of cool, but this pay it forward stuff is suspect at best and a scam at worst. But I've talked about that in all of my other reviews of Angel Studios films, so I don't want to keep kicking a dead horse. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I do for a second. When you do that stuff, Angel Studios, you make it seem like you are begging people to buy tickets without thinking your film is good enough to get word spread. That is a terrible way of marketing your picture. There have been so many films this year that have gotten success from word of mouth alone. Maybe let your film do the talking for you for a change, but I digress. Anyway, I give The Brink of War 2.5 stars. This film would cater to a certain age group, anger other groups, and I don't know how historians are going to feel about it, but bottom line is it's not bad, it's just predictable and the same stuff we keep getting from this studio. I still say The Senior is my favorite film from them, so maybe check that one out as well if you'd like to. And that is my review. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this, please like and subscribe. Here's links to my other videos. Follow me on social media if you like. And until next time, I am Ghost.